Well, we lived a normal middle-class life. We went to school, we went on vacations, we participated in the public amenities such as public swimming pools, indoor, outdoor in the summertime. We were able to go to the theater with our classmates. We participated in soccer games and all the things that the general citizenry of Germany participated in. Things changed all of a sudden. One of the things, we were not able to go along anymore with the other children to the theater. We weren't able to go to play soccer with them. We were segregated. The dividing line of normal life and what we might call persecuted life was 1933. When Hitler came to power, he took over, he and his cohorts, the Nazi Party, took over all facets of German life. Overnight, newspapers were taken over. Democratic, liberal editors were kicked out immediately. Some went to jail, some went to concentration camps. Courts were immediately made Judenrein. Jewish judges and attorneys were disqualified. I was visiting in my father's hometown, which was a small town in Tann, as I did very frequently, and this was during the Christmas holidays of 1933. And in the New Year's night, 33, 34, the Nazis there, it was sort of what we might call a mini Kristallnacht. They smashed the windows of all the Jews in that little town. I remember, the rocks coming in and everybody scared and running downstairs, hiding in the basement. And there were times when you were afraid that a gang would gang up on you, and you would learn early on to avoid those situations. And if you see a bunch of people somewhere, you'd stay away from it. There was more of that type of persecution, more of that type of early terrorism in the small towns, in the villages, than there was in a big city. Some people, though I think maybe it might have been a blessing, that gave them incentive to emigrate early. Others who were able to hang on for a while stayed, and some stayed too long. One no longer said good morning or good evening, one said Heil Hitler. And of course that's very difficult for a Jewish person to say, Heil Hitler. Letters were no longer signed with the phrase Hochachtungsvoll, which just roughly means very sincerely yours, or yours very truly, but they were signed mit deutschem Gruß Heil Hitler, which was German greetings, Heil Hitler. After 5 years of high school, I dropped out. My father died. We moved away. We moved, and the prospect of continuing an education in Germany didn't seem very promising anyhow. So I went to work at age of 15, and I was apprenticed in a clothing factory. The idea was for everybody to learn some practical trade. Just mere academic learning wasn't going to enable you to make it in a foreign country, in Palestine or in the United States, or wherever you went to. I and all my contemporaries left, not because we thought we were fleeing from the gas chambers, not because we thought we were going to be killed. You left because there was no economic opportunity, there was no opportunity to be educated, so you got out to where you could have a better life. And that's all we knew at the time. People were reluctant to leave all their property behind, and that's why some people waited too long. Older people had a greater emotional attachment and investment in that culture. They had lived their whole life there. And they had their education there. And so they felt that that was their country, that's where they wanted to live. So it was much easier for a young person to make that decision. The question was not whether, but the question was where and when. Those were the questions. Now, you knew you had to get out. I was fortunate. I was distantly related through marriage to the May family here in Nashville. And they sent me the affidavits. They came to Germany in 1936, and I spoke to Mortimer May and told him I wanted to leave and come to America, and he then sent me the necessary affidavit. There was a feeling that adults who did not have to be educated, who did not have to choose a career, and my mother was a housewife at the time. She was living with my grandmother, and the two women were together, that people like that could live out their life in Germany, that the young people were just being sent out for an economic future. Shipped out of Hamburg with the United States line straight to New York, and did not stop in any other country. And I was with a couple other young people that were coming to Nashville. I was the only one in my family, but I was not completely alone. I had relatives in New York who met me, and I stayed with them about 2 weeks, and then they put me on a train to Nashville. And of course, you know, in 1938 came the Kristallnacht, the night, you know, where all the glasses were broken all over, and a lot of persecution. Now it's getting dangerous. Well, by now, this was late 38, so by early 39, people were trying to get out. I had two priorities. The first was my mother, and then once we got her over here, she and I worked getting my grandmother out. When we go to Europe, we will usually go into Germany. And I have graves to visit there. At the cemetery where my father is buried in Frankfurt, it is a relatively new cemetery as European cemeteries go. The old cemetery was built in about 1929, and this cemetery was opened in 1929. And people are buried there in rows, in chronological years. My grandfather is buried there. He's in one of the earlier rows, 1931. And then my father died in 1935. And as you walk through the cemetery, you reach a row which is about 1940. And the next row is 1948. There is a missing thing, and there's a monument there to those who found no grave. So between 1940, what was left was deported to Auschwitz or similar places. And then after the war, people settled there again in 1945, 46, and I guess their earliest burials were in 48. I wonder, we see, when I deal with a German, an elderly German, a German my age, what in the world were you doing 50 years ago? You know, what because all these terrible death camps were not run just by Hitler and 3 or 4 helpers. They were run by thousands of people. And you know, what were you doing? What is it that Ulysses says in the Tennyson poem, I am a part of all that I have seen. So obviously the fact that I was born over there and underwent this persecution in the 30s, and then emigrated and came to this country, all that had to have a great impact on me and made me a different person than I might have otherwise become. You asked me about how I felt about my Judaism. And one of the lessons I would pass on, I have contemporaries who are Jewish and who do not practice it, and that's all right for them, they can do as they please. But they leave their children in a vacuum. And so their children are really people without roots. I would advise anyone to bring up their children in our faith, to give them something to root to, because there's enough negative things out there in the world against us. So we might as well reinforce them with the positive values of our experience and our religion and our culture.